I'm Christy Farmer from Dr. Langston's Anatomy and Physiology 142 class, and today I'm going to talk to you about the path to the alveoli. Two important things I think it's good to have an understanding of before we get started would be your zones, which are your conductive zones and your respiratory zones. Your conductive zones provides conduits for air to reach the respiratory zone. It also cleanses and humidifies and warms the air. Things that it consists of would be your nose, your pharynx, your trachea, your bronchi. It's also good to have a good understanding of the respiratory zone. The respiratory zone is going to be your site of gas exchanges. This is going to consist of your bronchioles, your alveolar ducts, your alveoli. So when we're talking about the path to the alveoli, we're going to start when we take a deep breath. So when air enters your nose or your mouth. And that is going to be where your conducting zone begins. So once air enters the mouth or the nose, which are connected through the nasal and oral cavities to the pharynx, through which the air passes to the larynx, and food to the esophagus. Then air passes through the larynx and the voice box, and then to the trachea or the windpipe. The main bronchial pathways, the bronchi, subdivide into lungs, into smaller and smaller airways. And finally, individualized air sacs called alveoli, where oxygen enters the bloodstream. So you noticed I flipped the paper when we switched from the conducting zone to the respiratory zone. If you remember back to what the respiratory zone is, it has to do with the bronchioles, the alveolar ducts, the alveoli. So as soon as the air passes through the larynx and the voice box, and then to the trachea, to the windpipe, you're going to switch to the respiratory zone because the main bronchial passageways subdivide the lungs into smaller and smaller airways. And finally, the individual air sacs called the alveoli, where oxygen enters the bloodstream. So it's really good to be familiar with your zones because it'll just kind of give you an understanding of how the whole passageway works. You remember you're always going to start with your conducting zone because it's when you take a deep breath in through your nose and your mouth. So the conducting zone is going to be where the air enters the body. The alveoli is going to be later when the site changes to gases. So you're going to want to think sometimes as how after you've eaten something and then you get gas, you had to first eat it to get the gas. So you're going to have to first take the deep breath to get the gas exchange. So that's a good way to think of how conducting zone starts and then the respiratory zone. So that was just a pretty basic understanding of the passageway. If you want a more descriptive, more detailed way, you can always look in your book from page 810 to 813. They're going to have a little better picture than my drawing and a little more breakdown understanding. That's just the easiest way I like to remember it. Good luck on your studies and hope this helps.